I grew up in like a very affluent white population, and and it was because Coventry is so diverse and everything like that, it was really just being here and not even being at uni was a huge sort of learning for me. But then I loved it, because where I grew up was where I find that there's affluence and there's money, I just didn't find people particularly personable. And I came to Coventry and it's like there's no judgment. I found people so like embracing of projects, of ideas. I just found people just really lovely. I was just sort of reflecting on it, and I've got a little boy, he's 2, he'll be 2 this Sunday, and I was thinking about when I was pregnant and any of the information about breastfeeding or anything like that, and it was kind of so few and far between. We didn't really have any education on breastfeeding at all, and I was thinking my antenatal classes were actually cancelled by the NHS because of funds. I just got a letter through saying I think it was due to lack of money. We were okay because we had we were in a financial position to go with the NCT class. Somebody wasn't. They have had any not just breastfeeding but any pre-pregnancy, birthing, and with the NCT they had we had half a day of breastfeeding, so it was a 3-hour, but even that wasn't particularly helpful. It was an American video that we were showed mainly, and it was all to do with facilitating the latch. And then the people that I did access right at the beginning, because my son was premature, not significantly but by 4 weeks, and because he was, I just found the latch really difficult because his mouth was so little, and it was really hard having to kind of like hold him, and hold him in place and make sure my boob was like in the right place. And it was like, so it just the effort, pure effort involved. So I think I can understand why people kind of might give up, because it takes so much. Like, it has been the hardest thing I've ever done. And I still breastfeed a bit now, and it's because I've just been doing it naturally, in terms of like intuitively, and I thought I'd take my son's lead and things like that. But you definitely realise that you become, after you've given birth and when you're breastfeeding, you're quite dependent on people. If you want to breastfeed, I think it means that you need others to care for you, and I think that our society doesn't do that. It's only in the last few weeks that Duke has been only maybe waking up once in the night, and that has been something that that I think people think, oh, if you don't do breastfeeding then or you don't feed them at night, they like they're waking up to be breastfed or to be comforted. And he's learned that they call it the association, but it's like that is his most comfortable way to fall asleep. So that is still how he does fall asleep. So it definitely is. I've kept it going because I just realised how I can like see the benefit. I can see how much it I feel like it gives him such a like secure base, in terms of like emotion, and it can like reset him if he's feeling overwhelmed or anything like that. So it seems to I feel like you could talk about it forever because it does so much, doesn't it? And I think it's not recognised, it's not appreciated. I think it was just such a I'd had some difficulties with mental health before I was pregnant, so I'm not sure. I think it was, from what I understand in speaking to therapists, doctors, it's that because it was such a big sort of life change, triggered, what had been a pre-existing condition, but actually just more so. So I think that breastfeeding has had a really positive effect. It's been two sides because sleep is paramount to my mental health and always has been, and so I think that one of the main difficulties that I had is that I wanted to do the breastfeeding, but the broken night's sleep has really negatively affected my mental health. However, on the flip side of that, in terms of, I've never had a problem with bonding particularly, but I think that whenever I might have had some negative or worries about you know, being a good enough mum or anything like that. I think the fact that I was able to I could see how happy he was, you know, for me to be able to breastfeed, that gave me a lot of positive sort of reinforcement. I think, you know, men, and we, you know, we live in a still quite like a man's world, you know, and I think that's the thing. It's like, you know, they love like routine and order. It's like and that's the like the prime difference with women, is that, you know, the fact we're cyclical and everything like that, and we you know, we change, our hormones and everything change day to day. And I think that's the thing. It's like with a child, you've just got to, luckily I'm not somebody that likes that sort of really, you know, regular structure, you know, a little bit, but I think that because when you have a child, you've got to be able to be flexible and, you know, and go with them. And it's like feeding on demand. I think that's, you know, whereas in previous generations, it was like you feed every 3 hours or whatever. And it's like, you know, learning that you just have to, sometimes you're sat, you know, for like hours, you know, with, especially in those early days with like the cluster feeding. From one, I tried to go back to, I left my job with the NHS last year because I just couldn't do it. I just felt like I felt like I needed, it was the right thing to put Duke obviously first and myself. And it was like, I was just exhausted, and he at one, I just didn't feel that I could leave him even with family. I felt very empowered in my birth, and I didn't feel vulnerable. I did some, like, I've always done like breathing and yoga and stuff, and I really felt like quite like, I remember my old boss, and she just said to me, you know, because I was pregnant when I worked there, and she said, oh, don't view it as view giving birth as being like frightening or scary, view it as being powerful. And I just tried to keep that with me, that she was like, it's like this energy, you know, and just like this female, you know, amazing sort of godly sort of energy, you know, life-giving. But it was afterwards, and it's interesting because I take photographs, and I took some film photographs of that birthing day, and then I've just got one of me with Duke, and it was afterwards, and it's then that I think I felt the most vulnerable, because I suddenly I felt quite childlike. I think I felt, you know, because you just like, you know, suddenly I think it just all feels very foreign, because you've had like this, I felt very like empowered growing a baby inside me, and then the fact that it's suddenly out and disconnected a little bit, it's really interesting. I felt more vulnerable definitely afterwards, because it's just, and also I think the hormones, I remember when in terms of that animalistic, that protective, I think I was on like really high alert. And I've got a cat, and when I got discharged and went back home, I even saw my cat as being like a threat. It was really strange. I was like on this really like other level of like, it was mad actually, a couple of times, and it was really strange. And the same, you know, like going to a shop or something like that. I think it's the unpredictability as well. It's like, I think that's the thing. It's, you know, not being able to, for me, you know, not being in control maybe of like everything, of like, and then you've got this entity with you who's its own sort of being. And yeah, no, it felt, everything kind of outside the house felt really scary, I suppose. I had quite bad postnatal anxiety, and well, like really bad, and I didn't feel, it was so bizarre. I felt like I had to be at my home to feed Duke, because I didn't feel comfortable doing it outside of my home. And so it was really hard, because I would like feed him and then maybe like go out for a bit. But if he wanted to feed, I didn't even want to feed him in the car. Like I was quite irrational, but I had to get him back to the house before I could feed him. And I think there was all, just because it was such a foreign I just didn't feel comfortable, I suppose. It took a very long time to kind of feel comfortable feeding him out, and I think I just never did fully feel that comfortable feeding him out and about. And I guess that's personal, but not, and I've been quite lucky, because I haven't had any negative comments or anything like that. You know, the World Health Organization says up to 2, you know, at the age of 2, if not longer, but actually, you know, it's very difficult. It would be very difficult to return to work and continue breastfeeding. I feel, you know, perhaps you do adapt to it, but I think that, you know, in terms of, especially if you're full time and you were trying to pump at work and things, and I think, and you're having a private space to do that isn't a lavatory, I think that's the other thing. It's like, you know, I think that's the other thing. It's like for some women out, you know, I might, there are certain women that maybe would see it as being, you know, wanting to have that privacy to breastfeed when you're out and about, but there are just not very many places to do that actually. Apart, you know, I think we went to Center Parcs last, yeah, no, not last year, like just when Duke was born, and I remember there, you know, asking for you know, if there was anywhere to breastfeed in, because he's so tiny, and it, you know, and I just didn't, there's so many people about, and you know, and got directed to a toilet. Yeah, there was a group, I can't remember the telephone line, there was somebody that that came out to see me after I gave birth, and just kind of observed and spoke about the latch. In the hospital, I had somebody come around and she just said, oh, you know what you're doing, kind of. I didn't know what I was doing, but she seemed to think that he latched fine, and it was minimal in the hospital, nothing really. And then yeah, and then this lady came out, and I did phone her a few times, phone this support group, and they did do a couple of coffee mornings, breastfeeding coffee mornings, one near where I lived previously to here, and at Tile Hill, and they did a coffee morning. And actually, when I went there a couple of times, that was quite nice because everybody there was breastfeeding, and it just made me, I wanted to set up a breastfeeding cafe. You know, I thought about it and thought, oh, you know, I just see it as or just you know, anyone can go, but it just somewhere pure, you know, where mothers just feel that they can breastfeed, because we just don't see it anywhere. One of the big things for me that because I've always been quite interested in like community living and you know, previous to being pregnant and having Duke, and it sort of even more so, you know, with COVID, and then also and then having Duke, I just realized how much, you know, you do need that like village, you need that community. And I think that, I personally think that was one of the main reasons that I really struggled mentally, because all the support systems that I had in place just for me, you know, all the community that I had in place with like work and, you know, and social life and things like that, as soon as I had Duke, it was like, it just, everything, it's like I had nothing. And, you know, and it was really bizarre. And I think that was the main thing that I found hard. And I would go to one of the baby groups with some of the people that I'd met on the NCT group. But I think because we didn't, you know, that definitely helped, but I wasn't amongst like minds particularly. I was going to something that was kind of quite orchestrated, and it just didn't, I think that's what I found. I've always viewed how we live as a society like a bit, you know, that it's not working. I did speak to a really good GP at one point who diagnosed my depression, but also sort of acknowledged it more than any. I spoke to quite a few when I was off work for a little bit of time, and no one really had no healthcare professional really had a proper conversation with me about it, but he did, and it's because his wife had also had postnatal depression with her the second child, and so he recognised some similarities, but he did say, you know, about having time for you. And I think that is the other thing. It's like, you know, you get, because of that lack of support or not wanting to always do a paid childcare, and you know, that sort of that individualization, it's like you can so easily get lost in it. And I think that's what I realized. I wasn't depressed about being a mother, I was just depressed because I just lost my own identity completely, which I'm only just now starting to kind of claw back a bit, but that's because of Duke's age. And I do think that is something that's really hard, especially when, you know, if you are with a partner and, you know, they get the 2 weeks, which is, you know, also ridiculous, and then they're back at work, and it's you are just very like isolated with it all. So it's but yeah, you know, having your hair done, and it's like underrated, but just any like bit of space, especially if you're a creative person, or, you know, and I like to think, and I think that's one of the big things with me. It's like I am a thinker, but if you've got someone else like diverting your attention all the time, you haven't got that, you know, any of that just free space and time just to like think about anything. Interesting, because it's like, is it a medical issue, you know, is it an actual, you know, obviously it's a mental health, but it's a consequent, it's symptoms that are consequential of your environment that you're in, you know, actually. And it's so, yeah, it's inevitable, but and it's also, you know, it's not, it shouldn't be medicalized perhaps quite so much, you know, in terms of, you know, I suppose some, you know, sometimes treatment should be medical, but I think that the actual treatment of that, how is that, I think that's what's interesting for me, because I think actually, what are we doing about that? I'd like GPs to take it on, because I've worked, when I worked in the NHS, and they were doing a bit more around the social prescribing, but I still think that when you go to a GP and it's like that, you know, you've got such a small amount of time for them to kind of assess what's going on, but they are still so quick to prescribe before they even ask you about nutrition, before they ask you about who you've got around, like, you know, any of the like life stuff. So I think community is like up there, you know, is like for all of those things, for motherhood and for, you know, older population, anyone who's feeling lonely. It's like, it's because we're not supposed to, I personally, you know, I'm interested in like the co-housing and things, because I personally don't think that we are supposed to be living in these on our own so much. And it's like, you know, relying on supermarket like ready meals and things like that. I was thinking about it, and it's like, if we were all, you know, pitching in together, it's this togetherness as opposed to doing everything individually, because it is actually like, it's not impossible, but it's really hard work to, you know, to be doing, you know, looking after children and doing all the cooking and all the, you know, everything like that. It's an enormity, whereas if it was shared, you know, it just makes life a lot easier, really. One of the big things for me is like the actual, it is really hard, and I think that it's like you have to obviously you can have people support, but it is also like just actually somehow like being able to mentally prepare, like, you know, women for, you know, the fact that it is, it, like some people might find it really easy. Some people, I've never found it painful. I've never had mastitis. I've never, you know, never found it painful, you know, and I still to this day have to like remind myself that being a mother is a job, you know, and I don't, it's not a job, you know, it's not, I feel like even that sort of terminology is weird, but it's like, it's an occupation. I have to just think, you know, I'm not earning a living, but I am doing something that is of value. You have got to be really determined to want, you know, to really want to do it. And I think that is the thing. I think almost because there is this other option, you know, which I guess it's useful that there is that, but unfortunately it's, you know, I had, you know, when I've had a health visitor come and things like that, it's like initially when they measure that 10%, is it, you know, when they first come out, and it's like if they've lost more than 10%, then, you know, there is that word, because that again is a is like a, you know, a measure, isn't it? And it's like, I think Duke was like he'd lost like 9% or something. And I think that because you're so like, I think one of the things that I was thinking about, it's like that reassurance that you are enough, that you can give your baby everything that it needs. I think that you don't need something else. And I think that that is something that's really interesting. I think that it's like that parallels, because if you feel that you're not enough, sometimes you think, oh, how can I possibly be giving my baby everything that it needs? And so I think that there's that thing where it's like filling a woman's like bucket of like, you know, you, after you're pregnant, your body has, you know, as long as you're getting all the nutrients and, you know, and being looked after and everything, you will produce everything that you need. And I think if you start to have that self-doubt that you might, you know, your baby's lost 10%, or, you know, and I think if you start to doubt that, you know, you sort of think you need the, you know, the formula or whatever, because it's like your inadequacy, how can you possibly be enough? I think I had that, where it was like real like confidence thing of feeling like it's a huge responsibility and burden to be the sole source of nourishment for your child, you know, I think that is like, it feels like an enormous like responsibility, as well as caring for it, looking after it, like raising it, actually being your body being the sole source of like nutrition is quite like massive, I think. And then, but once you realize that you are, and it's growing and everything like that, that is, you know, really rewarding.